Hello, what's up? Welcome back to the Hello Canal podcast. Welcome back to the show. My name is Kevin. Today, we're just going to do something different. So, for the past few episodes, we've been talking about how to be an adult. What are you looking for in terms of a job? How do you apply for a job? And how do you score the interview? Today's topic is going to be something that I just recently watched, and I think it has given me a lasting impression that I think I must share in today's episode. So bear with me. I hope you guys are ready. Get your cup of coffee or tea and let's begin. Alright, so before we begin, let me just share a small quick story. This is a story that is very popular and common. I would believe that you might have heard of it at some point of time in your life. So hopefully you understand what was the purpose of the story at the end. So it starts off with a scorpion which cannot swim, right? Because scorpions cannot survive in the water. This scorpion was asking a frog to carry it across the river on the frog's back, right? And the frog hesitates, afraid of being stung by the scorpion. But the scorpion argues that if it did that, they would both drown. So it's a lose-lose situation. Why would the scorpion sting the frog? So the frog considers this argument sensible and agrees to transport the scorpion, right? And midway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog regardless. So in return, dooming the both of them. The frog, with his dying breath, asks the scorpion why it stung despite knowing the consequences, to which the scorpion replies,
"I couldn't help it. It's in my nature."
And that is basically the discussion that we'll be having today. Nature versus nurture. So for anyone who is new to this topic, the nature versus nurture debate has been around since a very long time, for decades in fact. This debate involves the extent to which particular aspects of behavior are a product of either inherited or acquired influences. So to wrap up a bit of the definition, nature is what we think of as pre-wiring and is influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors, whereas nurture is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conception. So more something like the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning of an individual. So basically the debate centers around this nature versus nurture topic. The real discussion here is, for everything that we do, is it something that is naturally, something that's inbuilt into our DNA, our genetics, that we do perform in such a manner? Or is it something that, along the way we were taught to do as such? So to give another simple example, imagine a lion, right? When the lion gives birth to lion cubs, these lion cubs, sometimes they may or may not naturally have the instinct to hunt. So a lot of our documentary shows, like National Geographic, Discovery channels, there are researchers or scientists out there that focuses on the living lifestyles of these wild animals. And lions being one of the biggest creature on top of the food chain, they have certain techniques that they have to teach their young, the lion cubs, on how to hunt, how to stalk their prey, how to actually, be successful when hunting. Otherwise, what you'll get is you're just going to starve and die. So if I were to ask you, right, for a lion to actually hunt, do you think that naturally they would have learned how to hunt without any guidance from, let's say, their parents or peers? Or do you think that without that kind of guidance or teaching, they would not have been able to pick up the skill of hunting on their own? So why this is interesting? So I just watched this very interesting documentary on Netflix. The title of the movie or the documentary is Three Identical Strangers. Go catch it if you have time. I highly recommend it, and what I'm going to be discussing further down in today's episode, please take that as a spoiler warning. So please turn off this podcast episode if you do have the intention of watching it yourself, and finding out what happens. But if you do not have the time, or if you prefer if I narrate it to you, then you can feel free to stay on for this episode. Okay, now I've given you your warning. For everyone else that is still with me, you have the triplets. You have Bobby, David, and Eddie. So think about it this way, right? You have three kids born from the same mother that was separated at birth. So they were all three of them basically were adopted by their own respective families, and they had no idea of the existence of the other, not even the adoptive parents as well. Okay, so the entire story actually just began when Bobby went to a community college near where he lives. It's his first day there. He's still trying to figure things out, where he's going to sleep, where his room is, and what is the campus going to be like. As he was walking to his room, right, everyone that was walking past by him sort of recognized him. They're like, hey, welcome back. I didn't expect you to be here. Hey, it's good to see you again. Everyone knew who he was, but they didn't exactly address him by his name. With a very confused mindset, he walked to his room, and in the room there's basically no one, and he started to put his bag down to unpack, right? And out of nowhere, his roommate comes in, and his roommate, at the sight of seeing Bobby, was so freaked out. But this friend knew that this person, this Bobby that was in front of him, was not the same friend that he knew. And this friend basically waited for Bobby to introduce himself. And through that introduction, this friend was so excited, he basically cut the conversation short, interrupted Bobby, and directly brought him to the closest phone booth and started calling on this other friend of his that used to attend this community college. And that person was Eddie. Eddie is one of the triplets, but okay, let me just carry on with the story first. For both Bobby and Eddie, they were both very much confused because here is a friend who is acknowledging that these two looks exactly the same, they talk the same, they walk the same, and he would have suspected that these two are twins, right? So what happened was they were able to make an arrangement to meet each other. So Bobby meets Eddie, and at the sight of each other, they knew exactly that they're one half of a twin, right? Sort of, as how the story goes. And that just blew up into national news. Everyone wanted to know about this amazing, heartwarming news. Two kids that were separated, they found each other, and as well, they were from they had the same mother. And then this news was picked up by the media. They were going on talk shows one after the other. Now here's where it gets very interesting. Since every media was trying to report to cash in on this news, eventually our third player, David, caught attention of this in the newspapers. So David did some researching and he managed to get the contact details for David and Eddie. So he gives them a call, and tells the media, hey, it's not just two, we have three of them now, right? One original and two clones maybe, but a set of triplets. And so all three of them had a reunion. They met each other, and this was picked up by the media once more, and due to their popularity, they were going on even more talk shows and variety shows. They were basically having drinks all day, all night, partying, This was a very nice reunion. After so many years, they were able to sit down and have that family reunion that they always wanted. So it's a very heartwarming moment. And with everything that went on, they decided to start their own restaurant, the three of them. And this restaurant was named after them, the Triplets Romanian Steakhouse. Business was doing very, very well. They had a lot of customers. Everyone was just cheering and celebrating with them. You have celebrities, coming to congratulate them. And everyone was just happy for these three kids, right? It's amazing. They have the same characteristics, they have the same outlooks, they have the same hobbies. Everything about them just screams, hey, I've copy-pasted 2 times more. And the results were uncanny, right? Even there was a statement indicating that one of the girlfriends of the triplets could not even figure out who was who, or which was which, right? Well, who knows, maybe they did have some triangles. Oh no, in this case it would be a square. A square relationship within. Okay. But the story doesn't just end there. The triplets wanted to find out who their maternal mother was. So luckily and fortunately for them, the state library has this requirement of retaining all of the data and information of births at hospitals within the state. With this information, they were able to track down who their mom was, and they actually did manage to meet up with her, have a very, very brief interaction. And what they found out was their mom was an alcoholic. They drink a lot, as much as the kids, in fact, which is not a very good sign. It's a red flag. And ultimately, the mom was not able to share the real reason why she abandoned them, right? And the triplets were left unfulfilled. So although they did not pursue any further, their parents were looking to find out the truth because something was suspicious to them and they wanted to know further. The parents basically went to this orphanage agency called the Louise Wise Services. This was the institution that they reached out to adopt the 3 kids, right? And basically their question was, why didn't they know of the other 2 siblings during the adoption process? And the response from the orphanage agency was that if they were to have bundled all 3 together, imagine like a promotion package, the chances of anyone adopting 3 kids at the same time is very, very low, right? Imagine rather that if you go in for adoption and the minute you take one in, you have to take in the other 2, and your own personal financial status may not be even able to support the food, the education, or just the general well-being of all 3 kids. However, the parents were still very angry and frustrated because they believed that in the event that they were aware of the other 2 siblings, all 3 sets of parents would have adopted all 3 of them. All the triplets would have been adopted by the same family. But there was little to be discussed further and everyone left. There is a very small plot twist here which I will not mention. So go and watch the actual Netflix show, the documentary itself, and see what happens during this discussion. Alright, so let's skip a bit of the timeline, nothing important, and just to share with you that all of the 3 kids, the triplets, they were already married off and they had their own life with family and kids. Unfortunately, their business, their restaurant did not last long, and so they each went their own separate ways. And they were living quite far apart from each other. Now, I want to talk about Eddie because there is a very special scenario around Eddie. So Eddie is one of the triplets that is the only one that is suffering from a bipolar disorder. And basically this got worse ever since he left the restaurant business. And Eddie has always had a problem, a very questionable relationship with his father. So now that Eddie found his 2 brothers, right, he felt like he was finally in a real family. But now that they were living apart, things were not going well between all 3 of them. So under the pressure and stress of Eddie's own mental health, one day he decided to just check out of this world. He shot himself in 1995 around the age of 34 years old. But the story doesn't just end there, right? Over the years, multiple pairs of adopted twins were able to find each other or discover each other. One interesting fact was that they were all around the same age as the triplets. So this is interesting, right? Journalists were investigating into this anomaly and the coincidences just doesn't stack up. You have a significant number of orphans that were separated even though they were identical twins at the time of their birth. Thankfully, the journalists were able to trace back to a psychological experiment. And that time, the head of the experiment was this person named Peter Neubauer. And as part of this experiment, identical twins, triplets, or maybe even more were taken as part of an experiment. And these kids were set up for adoption and had their growth closely monitored. So in the disguise of following up on the adopted child's growth, the researchers were actually sent to the adoptive home to assess the mental capabilities of the children. They were trying to compare notes. What is the difference between child 1 and child 2? Even though they're identical twins that were separated at birth, is there a difference in their behavior or their personality? And I think this actually crosses a gray ethical line, just like with Dolly, the clone lamb. Should we as humans play God and focus on research and possibly come up with ways to benefit mankind, or should we just avoid any sort of potential ethical dilemmas and just not pursue further? So this is a question I think is worth your time to really think about it. And also there might be other points that you may want to take into consideration. So think about vaccines. We're being hit by COVID-19 at the moment. Vaccine is a very important and crucial thing that will help relieve us from this COVID-19 pandemic. For all creation of vaccines, there will be the first batch of animals and humans, which will be given trials, these vaccine trials. And usually these trials, the vaccines are not even complete and a lot of testing, further additional testing is required. So what happens is the animals and humans will suffer from side effects, or in the worst case scenario, they might even die. But here's the kicker. It is only with all of these sacrifices that we can develop a well-tested vaccine that can be administered to the general population of planet Earth. So this is the ethical line that I'm asking you to really think about. Is sacrificing the few for the greater good an acceptable decision? Anyways, back to the research on the twins by Peter Neubauer. So the details of this experiment is still classified until today. No one who was ever involved could share the entire details about this experiment. So this experiment was conducted with Yale University, and they are not allowed to disclose the information of this experiment until the year 2065. So that just begs us to wonder, why was this experiment done? What was the exact purpose of this experiment? And how did they manage to get hold of these kids and send them for adoption? Did they sign a waiver from the expecting moms, to compensate them for their children that they were going to give birth to? There are a lot of factors that needs to be taken into consideration here. However, one thing is known is that one of the factors of the experiment is the adoptive family's environment. So we are talking about how poor or how rich, how loving their family is. The triplets, each of their family had also adopted a sister before them. All three sisters of the same age, but unlike the triplets, all three of these sisters did not come from the same maternal mother. So it was with the adoption of these three sisters that led to the experimental scientists or researchers to be able to determine the wealth and the health of the families that the triplets were placed in. So basically this indicates that there was already a lot of effort that was put into this experiment. They had to ensure that the families that the triplets were being placed into, or even any other identical twins, had the right type of family environment, one that is different, very much different from the other, before to conduct the right experiment and get the relevant results. Okay, so this ties back to the nature versus nature debate discussion, because in the closing moments of the show, this documentary, we were shown how naturally and genetically identical the triplets were, from their hobbies down to their movements. Everyone had all three of them had the same type of behavior. Everyone was just focusing and looking at the similarities that they had, and they were all rejoicing that these triplets were able to find each other. But nobody ever bothered to understand the differences between them. And this is the thing that stuck with me. Because of how Bobby and David had loving parents, they were nurtured to have a very good close bond and relationship with their family, to stay mentally strong, whereas Eddie did not get the same benefit. And it is regretful to say that he's no longer with us, and his father still thinks about him until this day. So nature tells us our DNA, what kind of characteristics we have, what genetically, how are we built. It's built into our core. It's not something that we can just easily change or manipulate. And nurture, on the other hand, shows us our actual real behavior. It shows us our personalities and how we act from a day-to-day basis. It allows us to always experience this amazing phenomenon known as tomorrow. So with the entire sharing and discussion of today's podcast episode, I hope you can see the emphasis on nurture over nature, and which is the more important aspect to focus on. So for everyone that has time, please do catch this documentary. It's called 3 Identical Strangers, available now on Netflix. Of course, if you just need a quick summary, you can go online and look up the names. Just type in triplets that discovered each other, and you should be able to, at least have a few web pages, a few news articles that you'll be able to update yourself with. And that's basically it for today's episode, guys. Nature versus nurture. Of course, always choose nurture. I hope you find today's episode interesting, and if you would like to see more content like this, please do leave us a note, feedback or comment on Hello Cannot Podcast, either on YouTube or Instagram. Until next time, please take care and stay safe.